mode. The speed's lame as hell, yeah, I think I'm getting bored. I'm crushing hard as hell, but fuck it, I'll take more. Never reap what I sow, shit is boring like a poem. Lame ass lyrics reads like Edgar Allan Poe. Tranquilizers got me trank, I'm soaring on the flooring. Zeros in my bank, got 4 Ys like a Mormon. Kill the foreman, fuck 10-4, copy that. No 53, I be killing all the blacks. Got high PCI, that's not something that.
Okay, let's go. So, I'm putting up some Risk of Rain gameplay. Oh, yeah, I've sobered up a little bit. By the way, if you guys want to, I don't know, fund my drug addiction, I mean, help a brother out, I'm gonna put my Monero address in the description, so you can get me more ketamine. Please, please, please. Okay, so anyways. Right, yeah, do not look the big other in the eyes, right? So, during my stay at the psychiatric hospital, I read the trial, which is, you know, probably not the best thing to read when your life is at the mercy of some horrible faceless bureaucracy. But when is it not, right? And strangely, this mask of civility, which the court officials seem to wear in the book, was also worn by the nurses and doctors at the hospital. And the doctors displayed this like ever-present, cool, scientific indifference to the suffering of their patients. Like people would be screaming and crying, and the doctors would just like fluoride stare at them and tell them to, you know, quote unquote, be reasonable, right? In the air quotes. Or worse, they'll have their legal holds extended and maybe even be sent to the unit where they would literally strap you to a bed. They called it the intensive care unit, which is obviously just a euphemism for we're gonna strap you to a fucking bed, right? And this detachment in the face of suffering, even when, you know, ironically, empathy and acknowledgement of its cause. Oh wait, this is the wrong run. Empathy and I can't play this game without fucking commanded. Right. So empathy and acknowledgement of its cause. Okay. Would likely help mitigate it. It's made acceptable under the pretense that, you know, they're only the agent of some faceless, I just called a fucking nuke on this guy, of some faceless inhuman system's will, right? And this is going to tie into the big other, which I'm going to talk about later, as foreshadowing, if you will. It's under the pretense that the system is somehow fucking optimal, because it's rational and cannot account for silly things like your suffering, despite that being its actual purpose. And even this presupposes that the system exists at all, right? Which it doesn't. So I'm not going to hop off Mark Fisher's dick for the entirety of this video, so I'm going to quote capitalist realism. You're going to get sick of it by the end. But to quote capitalist realism, Mark Fisher notes that the quest to reach the ultimate authority on who will finally resolve K's official status can never end, because the big other can never be encountered in itself, right? They're only officials, all more or less hostile, engaged in acts of interpretation about what the big other's intentions are. And these acts of interpretation, these, you know, deferrals of responsibility, are all that the big other is. Bluntly summarized, I'm butchering this right now because I can't really multitask, but bluntly summarized, the bureaucrat claims that, I was just following orders, right? The classic, I was just following orders, appealing to the faceless other, when really these orders were entirely self-imposed, and the faceless other is nothing but the bureaucrat's interpretation of it, right? Interpretation of the orders, right? And this ex post facto justification of action via appealing to rationality, it's all too common under capital. No longer is rationality used to derive actions to take, but to justify actions after the fact, you know, to provide a scapegoat to disavow one's will and one's evil. And I could go into an example about the, you know, gotcha utilitarians, what about the organs, right? But I don't know, I guess it's just trivial to see that, rationality is not meant to be used that way. It's not meant to be used as some sort of shield against criticism, dude. Like, just because you don't say something angrily does not mean that it's correct, and just because you say something angrily does not mean that it's not correct. In fact, anything that you have, anything that is worth talking about, you should have some sort of emotional attachment to, right? I don't know. Okay. Anyways, yeah, and. You know, this is another tangent, but this phenomenon is sort of similar to the strategy that capital uses to, you know, like, contain hyperstitions. I'll get some gasoline so you guys aren't watching some boring-ass gameplay. But to contain hyperstitions, right? Like, ideas cannot be touched, you know, directly, so to speak, but rather they have to be considered without emotion, right? Without attachment, without belief, rationally. Okay, so that's part one. I'm thinking I should probably not do the gameplay for part two. But I don't know. It's kind of fun. Yeah, in the hospital, trivial requests would just be, trivial requests would always be met with, oh, I am uncertain, I will ask a superior. And if you actually put in the fucking significant amount of effort to see the request traverse up the chain and reach someone who could make the decision, they would curtly say, no, it is the rules. And when questioned further, they would simply repeat that it's the rules and look at you as if you're being unreasonable. There it is again, being fucking unreasonable, right? And to quote Fisher, again, we are all familiar with the bureaucratic libido, with the enjoyments that certain officials derive from this position of disavowed responsibility. It is not me, I'm afraid. It is only the regulations. The frustration of dealing with bureaucrats often arises because they themselves can make no decisions. Rather, they're permitted only to refer to decisions that have already been made by the big other. I think a crucial part of this is that the officials are never outright hostile, right? They have to maintain this mask of civility. They must remain reasonable. And okay, this is gonna be a bit of a hot take, right? But I was discussing the N-word with someone the other day, and I am of the belief that the mask of civility serves a very important role here as well. And let's just pull up with some context first, okay? So it's far cheaper to absorb and maintain structures which maintain an ethnic, which enslave an ethnic slave caste, right? Than it is to fucking destroy these structures and create a new slave caste from scratch. And we all know that capital requires a slave caste to function, right? We haven't reached a point of automation where this is not required. And the idea that capital is somehow post-racial, which I blame William, I'm calling you out, William Gibson. I blame William Gibson for this, right? Is fucking absurd. I'm gonna make a video on Gibson and Ted Kaczynski soon. Anyways, like, we all know the evil and brutality that these structures inflict, but we must never look it in the eyes, right? We must never remove the mask of civility and say the N-word. Oh, no, it is evil, but we do it without passion, without hatred, right? That would be racist if we did. And it's just this fucking mask, like, oh, it is only efficient, right? It's only efficient. These structures are only efficient. Like, you must separate yourself from this evil with this pseudo-rational indifference. So here is the first pro tip. Consider, but without belief. Do evil symbols are valued more than the reals they point to. Oh my fucking god, no way, I fucking died right out the gate. Okay, anyways, right. Oh shit, I spawned back in. Okay, yeah, so it seemed like the goal of the psychiatric hospital in which I stayed was not really to, aid patients, but rather to project a representation of aiding patients. And these things are actually very different, as you'll soon see. And I think that under capital, a lot of times, metrics are, like Good's Law, except not really, metrics are sometimes, like, entirely diametrically opposed to the thing that they measure, in this case especially. So in the case of the hospital, the metric was just doing the bare minimum to satisfy the legal metrics to avoid liability, right? Like, doctors would extend the legal holds of patients to their maximum length for plausible deniability. They would say, well, we kept him for as long as we fucking could, so if he went outside and killed himself after, like, there's something we could have done, right? They prescribed the wrong medication haphazardly, and if refused, it would be counted as a compliance issue against you in the trial. And they would especially really like to prescribe antipsychotics because antipsychotics are like the safest, or like the worst medication in terms of side effects, but the safest for doctors to prescribe because nobody can abuse them, right? So of course they're going to prescribe this shit because nobody has ever gotten in trouble for prescribing antipsychotics. And they hand you endless forms to sign away your rights, all presented without explanation as if they're trivial and fucking insignificant. And smiling social workers will ask you, oh, how are you feeling? And if you answered honestly, which of course you're feeling like shit, right? Otherwise, why are you in the psychiatric hospital? It's quietly noted to be presented in the release hearings. And it seemed that the metrics for mental health, mainly how long you stayed in the hospital, which is what they talked about in the release series mostly, were valued over their actual mental health, over the patient's actual mental health. The thing which this metric measures, right? Because this place is fucking disgusting. The longer you stay there, the worse you're gonna feel, obviously. And Fisher observes this pattern in actually a lot of neoliberal bureaucracies. Auditing, and I'm gonna start quote, so begin quote, auditing can perhaps be conceived of as the fusion of PR and bureaucracy, because the bureaucratic data is usually intended to fulfill a promotional role. In the case of education, for example, exam results or research ratings augment or diminish the prestige of a particular institution. The frustration for the teacher is that it seems as if their work is increasingly aimed at impressing the big other, which is collecting and consuming the data. Data, of course, has been put in inverted commas here because much of the so-called information has little meaning or application outside of the parameters of the audit. That's the most important part. As Ava Berglund, I'm butchering her name, the information the audit creates does have consequences, even though it is so shorn of local detail, so abstract as to be misleading or meaningless, except that is by the aesthetic criteria of the audit itself. Holy shit, she cooked with that. Okay, end quote. of course, this pattern of overvaluing symbols isn't isolated to metrics and auditing, right? I'm not really going to go into the whole video essayist rant and jerk off about hyperreality and that fucking French guy, but I would be the... Actually, no, I'll talk about that later. Okay, so back to the main topic. Like I was talking about before, like despite the poor conditions in the facility obviously causing more distress than it alleviated in many of my fellow patients, any observation of this and request for expedited release were met with extended sentences. Here, the big other serves another purpose. So Fisher defines the big other as the consumer of PR and propaganda, the virtual figure which is required to believe even when no individual can. Yet the distinction between what the big other knows, i.e. what is officially accepted and is widely known and experienced by actual individuals, is very far from being emptily formal. It is the discrepancy between the two that allows ordinary social reality to function. When the illusion that the big other did not know can no longer be maintained, the incorporeal fabric holding together the social system disintegrates. He goes on to example, I'll just put on the screen because you guys aren't toddlers, right? Like you guys can fucking read that shit. Anyways, and I feel like this is so important here because both the patient and the doctor know that release is a question of liability. Moreover, both the patient and the doctor know that that release is a question of liability, right? So everybody knows that everybody knows. So why are we putting on this little performance, right? It cannot be said out loud, because the big other cannot be looked in the eyes, lest it hits you with the mods, turn it to stone, like some fucking post-Fortis Medusa.
Mods, crush the skull, thank you.
Yeah, instead, the most prudent strategy suggested by both my useless public defender and the patient advocate was to present a self-awareness of one's own mental illness, right? As Fisher says, new bureaucracy takes the form not of a specific delimited function performed by particular workers, but invades all areas of work with the result that, as Kafka prophesies, workers become their own auditors, forced to audit their own performance. Post-Fortis control structures are bottom-up. It's a decentralized panopticon in which not only must you constantly act as if you're about to be observed, but out of fear of observation, report on yourself in a critical way, despite there likely being no observer other than yourself. To quote Fisher again, the result is a kind of postmodern capitalist version of Maoist confessionalism, in which workers are required to engage in constant symbolic self-denigration. At one point, when our line manager, he's talking about like doing audits for his university on themselves, our line manager was extolling the virtues of a new light inspection system. He told us that the problem with our departmental logbooks were that they were not sufficiently self-critical. Holy shit, bro! I don't know. That's just kind of crazy. But yeah, like you cannot look it in the eyes, right? Doctor knows that he's gonna get deep shit if you go out and kill yourself. You know that the doctor knows that he's gonna get deep shit if you go out and kill yourself. But the one person who I knew at the psych ward who actually asked for an expedited release, holy shit, they went all scorched earth on her. They extended her sentence to like the maximum sentence. I say sentence as it's like jail, but you know they extended her legal hold, right? Because if you look it in the eyes, despite everyone knowing that very fragile surface tension sort of disintegrates. Okay. I'm gonna pull up some fucking bloopers, and it's kind of crazy that I did a whole capitalist realism video about mental health, and I never talked about the part where Mark Fisher talks about the reals of capitalism. But I guess I could just go over that real quick. I'm not gonna put up any citations, so basically, Baudrillard, which was the guy I said I wasn't gonna talk about earlier, has this idea that reals, which is like a real thing, sort of bleeds into reality. What is reality? Well, he defines reality as sort of this accepted consensus which masks what is underneath, right? It's like this cultural consensus which masks the reals which are underneath, and the reals sometimes bleed through, right? And Mark Fisher uses this in his critique of capital when he says, you know, like climate change is a real of capitalism, right? Like capital doesn't have the proper look ahead to handle climate change. And another real of capitalism, he said, was Mentos health, right? You're the health of your little Mentos. And he says that mental health in capital is treated as either an individual issue or as a neurological issue, right? As a genetic or purely neurological issue, when in fact it's actually in large part a cultural issue, right? But of course the capitalists will just prescribe you more fucking antipsychotics and tell you to go to therapy for your trauma or whatever, right? It's fucking bullshit. Anyways, that's the end of that video. I'm gonna pull up some bloopers. I've been wintermute. You've been a patient listener. Listen, I couldn't even get through fucking... I can't get to tip number 3, right? Your attention span probably can't handle more than 15 minutes. Mine can barely fucking handle making it. So, I'll see you around. Bye.
mlock, you fucking pussy. I know for a fact you did that shit. I am not crazy. There's no way on fucking
not
earth
crazy.
you have fucking used mlock before.
I'm not
That is such a
crazy.
fucking bullshit lie. And like I know I troll around a lot, but I'm not fucking around right now. You're literally a fucking fraud. There is no way on fucking earth that you have used mlock before. I've never used mlock before. I've only used it fucking once. I used it once. And you're telling me you want me to fucking believe that you've actually used that shit before, and you don't even know about basic fucking functions like p read, p write, p close, p open, you fucking idiot. You're so
trying.
fucking useless. And then you want to flashcard me? Well, then you want to flashcard me on fseek and Unix domain sockets? Like that's fucking hard, you fucking loser. Oh my god.